My golden brother didn't let me live my whole childhood when I left and got married. He hired a girl to frame me and sue me because he likes my wife. Hello, Reddit. I'm using a throwaway account because I need some advice on a complicated situation I'm facing. Please excuse any mistakes. I just want to get this out there. A bit about me. I'm a 43-year-old man and the younger of two siblings. I'll try to provide a chronological account to give you a full picture. My brother Michael, who is 45, was always the golden child in our family. Growing up, he could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. When he got bad grades, they would cheer him up and help him improve, whereas I was always met with disappointment even if my grades were decent. For example, he got a new car and a big party for his high school graduation. While I received $300 and a pat on the back, Michael wasn't a bad brother, but we mostly did our own things. I didn't complain much, but I felt the need to move out and explore the world on my own. I went to university in another city and earned my MBA in 7 years. After graduation, I landed a job back in our hometown. During this time, I had minimal contact with my family except for birthdays and holidays. My brother, not being the brightest academically, barely graduated from high school. He dropped out of college and my parents helped him set up a small hardware shop. I was happy for him, but focused on my own life. Around this time, I started dating Emily, who was 20 then. We met in college and were both from the same city. When we moved back home, we moved in together, found jobs, and focused on building our life. During the holidays in 2008, I introduced Emily to my family. They were surprisingly warm and receptive, making me feel more loved than I had in years. I noticed Michael looking at her a lot during the gathering, but thought nothing of it. However, he started visiting my apartment more frequently from once every 4 months to almost daily. It became intrusive, especially since he came in the evenings when Emily and I were trying to unwind after work. I eventually had to set boundaries, leading to a big fight with my parents. Michael apologized and reduced his visits to once every other month on weekends, which was more manageable. In 2011, I proposed to Emily, and we announced our engagement to the family. My parents were happy, but Michael just shook my hand and left the small party I had organized. He disappeared for a couple of weeks after that. We got married in 2013, and Michael brought a +1 to the wedding, a woman named Laura. They got married 11 months later in 2014. My marriage was going well. We had our first daughter, Olivia, in 2015, and our second, Chloe, in 2017. In 2016, Laura messaged me that Michael was obsessed with Emily, and that was the biggest reason for their separation. I apologized to her and wished her the best. I also talked to Emily and asked her about her interactions with Laura, and she told me that Laura was always a bit cold and distant towards her from the start. I decided to confront my brother in front of my family and asked him why he was destroying his life because of his obsession with my wife. He was blindsided by that question and denied everything. We had a massive argument that basically ended with me telling my brother that he was no longer welcome in my house. Both my parents and Emily talked to me and convinced me that no matter what, he was still family. So for everyone's sake, I decided to be amicable. It seemed like he was genuinely working on himself and we went on with our lives. Fast forward to 2018. I can still recall that day vividly. It was the 25th of July and I was running multiple errands. My wife took both our kids to see their grandparents. It was sometime after lunch that I got a call from my father telling me to come to their home, and he had a lot of anger in his tone. As soon as I entered, I noticed a lot of tension in the air. My wife was a crying mess, and my parents were trying to console her. Some of my extended family members were there as well. I asked what happened, only to be accused of being the one who committed the assault. I was shocked and confused. They claimed that at a party a couple of weeks back I had assaulted a girl and then texted her not to tell anyone about it or there would be consequences. I had known this girl, Amanda, for some time. We went to high school together and she was part of a larger friends group that I occasionally hung out with. According to her, after the party, which was at a club, I followed her to her car and assaulted her there. She shared screenshots of the alleged conversation with my wife and told her this entire tale. My father slapped me hard and my parents told me they never wanted to see my face again. Emily was angry and said that we were done. I tried to convince all of them that I never did that, but it fell on deaf ears. I was basically kicked out of their house and told that neither Emily nor the kids would be returning, and my father would be coming over to take their stuff from my apartment. When my father came, I begged and pleaded, but he basically packed a couple of bags and told me never to contact them again, and that he would personally hand me to the cops if I did. By evening, Michael had shared the screenshots and all the details to our extended family group on WhatsApp, from which I was unanimously kicked out. The next few days, I even had people from my friend group calling me to say they were disgusted with me and never to contact them again. I was a mess during that time. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't even work properly. My boss also heard the rumors going around, but couldn't do much until he saw some police action against me. He advised me to leave the organization on my own, to keep my record intact, and said he would ensure that I didn't have to even serve my notice. Period. I tried to argue my case, but he told me that if the cops came knocking on my door, I would be kicked out anyway. And in such a scenario, the gravity of the case would mean I wouldn't get severance and my record would be tarnished. I grudgingly agreed to his request and left the organization in the next few days. In mid-August, while I was still wallowing in my misery, I received two documents from the court. One was a letter of discernment, and the other was divorce papers. I was quite drunk, but I went to my parents' place anyway, only for my brother to come and beat me up and tell me that I was a disgrace to the family and that it was good that I was disowned. I had blood coming out of my face. By the time he was done with me and I was barely able to stand, my parents and my wife looked at me from afar, but did nothing. I managed to get myself up after some time, a crying mess, and realized that I had lost everything and everyone I knew. I stayed holed up in my apartment for the duration of the divorce. It went as amicably as it could as I was jobless. Plus, my now ex-parents stated they would pay for the children, so I didn't have to pay child support or any alimony. By January 2019, I was divorced, but trying to pick up the pieces of what was once my life was hard. During this time, I also felt like confronting Amanda. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it could have made matters worse for me. Due to the women-centric laws in my country, which meant one phone call, and I would be looking at 5 to 6 years in jail. In February 2019, I got into a major accident and spent a good part of 5 weeks in recovery. The staff told me that they contacted my emergency number, which was still Emily at that point, and she hung up and no one showed up. Once I recovered, I realized that I had spent through a good part of my savings and needed to get back on my feet, if not for anything else, to have a roof over my head. However, I realized that I wouldn't be able to do anything in the place I was at. So I sold all my furniture, paid my remaining dues for the rented accommodation, and decided to start from scratch in a different place. I moved to a city 2 hours away and tried to get a job for some time, but to no avail. I also used to drink myself silly, and thoughts of offing myself were recurring. Waking up after seeing a nightmare in a cold sweat almost became the norm. For 4 months this went by, after which I ran into an old acquaintance, David, from college. He was the quiet kid during that time and didn't really talk to anyone. But seeing him after so many years was odd, as he spotted me out from the crowd and called my name. We greeted each other and talked about our lives for a bit. I told him I was in the city looking for a job. He told me he had just quit and was planning on setting up a management consulting firm of his own. He then invited me for a drink later on, where after a lot of talking about our professional lives, he offered me an opportunity to work with him as he needed a couple of people who knew their stuff. At this point, I thought I needed to work my ass off to get my mind off these thoughts, so I agreed, but I told him I wanted to meet him and his team and talk to them before we moved forward. 2 days later, he introduced me to another guy, Mark, and told me that currently it would be just the three of us going forward. I shook hands with Mark and told them that before they proceeded further, I had something to say. I then proceeded to spill the beans on everything that had happened to me during that time and how I was disowned and divorced because of it. With the tears coming through in between, David and Mark told me that they felt sorry for me, but also told me that if there was no criminal record on my person, then there would be no issue. I stated that the police never came to my house and they were relieved. David did mention that to be on the safer side. He was going to ask someone to run a full background check, and I understood his position and agreed. During this time, I was living in a rundown place that I rented to minimize my expenses. I waited patiently for 2 weeks, but was still looking for jobs in other places in case things didn't work out. 2 weeks later, David called me and we met up later that day. He stated that my record was clean of any allegations and welcomed me to the team. After that, I threw myself into my work and started therapy sessions on Derek's advice. I also joined a gym, invented a lot of my frustration on the punching bag, going from an average of 77 kilograms to above 105 kilograms. Derek and I became gym brothers, and I basically looked at him as an older brother since he was essentially Michael's age. By the end of 2019, I had regained a good amount of control over my life. The consulting firm took off and the money rolled in. I rented out a nice apartment in a decent neighborhood. The Band-Aid also came off to an extent, and I realized I needed to take some necessary steps to move on. I went to court and changed my last name officially on record. I adopted Derek's last name with his and his parents. Go ahead. They saw me as a nice guy and involved me in a lot of their family functions, including me being the best man at Derek's wedding. So this was a way of thanking them as well. I tried dating a bit, but it never worked out for me due to my emotional issues until I started dating Kim, 29, in 2020. She was half Korean and half Italian. I met her at a coffee place where I picked up my coffee and occasionally sat there. She used to work behind the counter. We saw each other only for the order. But once, when Derek and I were there, he noticed that she was constantly looking at me. He told me that I should ask her out. I approached a bit hesitant and asked her out for drinks later that day. We had a nice date, and she said that she hoped we could see each other again. I knew that this was going to go the same way my other dates went, which was that I told them about my past and they ran off. I never blamed any of them. However, the second time I took Kim for lunch, I decided to tell her before we moved ahead. I wanted to let her know about my past so she could make an informed choice. It was like she was blindsided. I told her that I never had, and never could think about doing that to anyone, and that I was still struggling to move on from the aftermath. I told her that she needed to know what she was getting into before we even thought of going on any further dates. A couple of days later, I got a call from Kim, and she told me she wanted to meet up. We met at the same coffee place where she worked, and she told me that she trusted me and said that she wanted to give it a shot. At this point, I was skeptical and even cried a bit because I couldn't believe that I could even find a bit of normalcy restored in my life. We went out for a few dates and really enjoyed each other's company, and it felt like I was finally able to start healing. I went on my first vacation in years with her to Europe and had a great time overall. When the pandemic hit in 2021, we remained in contact throughout over the phone and FaceTime. When things regained some level of normalcy in the latter half, she asked if she could move in with me, and I agreed. She was let go from her coffee shop and was trying her luck with job hunting. She was an amazing cook, and that's when I suggested that maybe she could try to set up a place and get into the food business. By mid-2022, and with the financial backing of her parents, she had a cloud kitchen set up which delivered food to the nearby areas. Both our lives were doing great. I still had a lot of emotional issues, though I no longer had thoughts of offing myself. But the nightmares still continued occasionally. Kim announced in February 2024 that she was pregnant, and a range of mixed emotions came over me, from being overjoyed to starting all over again, to crying out for the loss of what I once had. I was all over the place. Kim comforted me, and we fell asleep in each other's arms. I proposed to Kim, and she was overjoyed. It felt like everything was finally moving to a point where I could have some semblance of peace in my life. We were set to be married, and all the preparations were in full swing for our wedding in mid-June this year. I am sorry for the long post, but I needed to put out all the information possible for you to understand what a roller coaster things have been for me. At the end of May, I received a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, I could hear someone crying. She said, "Hi, it's Amanda." I instantly recognized the voice and cut the call, trying to hold back my anger. Kim was with me and saw my face and came over concerned. I was trying to hold back my mix of tears and anger and told her who it was. When the call came in again, Kim picked up the phone and put it on speaker. There was a guy on the other side who explained that he was Amanda's fiancé and she wanted to come clean about what she had said back then. She got on the phone and kept apologizing over and over again and kept crying continuously. Kim did most of the talking as I became a sobbing mess, unsure of what I wanted to do. So Kim said that they would call back. She immediately called Derek over, who listened to everything patiently as Kim explained what had happened. He gave me a hug and advised that we should set up a meeting at a lawyer's place with her confession so that it could help out in case of any future possible issues. I called my lawyer and explained everything to him. He said he would set up a meeting in his office and gave me a time and date. I called Amanda and told her that she needed to come over to my lawyer's office and we would discuss it there. 3 days later, we met up at his office. Amanda looked half dead with her expressions. Her fiancé was the only person with her. My lawyer set up the meeting with a camera to record the entire session. I asked him to mediate, and I asked Kim to come with me. We sat across the room and she started to explain in detail what had happened back then. A lot of things were said and discussed, but here's the crux of it. She and my brother were dating back in 2016, but no one knew he was the person behind the entire plan to frame me. She went along because she really loved him and would do anything for him. He got a new phone and stole my profile picture from my WhatsApp number back then, and used it to create the fake screenshots by chatting back and forth with Amanda. I went from crying to being filled with rage. I can honestly say that if it wasn't for Kim, I might have been charged with assault. Kim was pretty furious and worked up as well, partly due to the pregnancy, and she tore Amanda a new one with her verbal lashing. Though my lawyer tried to maintain civility, it was clear that Kim was very pissed off. She went further to tell Amanda's fiancé that if he still marries this human garbage, then he deserves what's coming to him. Fighting back, anger and tears, I asked them why they were coming out and telling this to me now. Her fiancé, Mark, came forward and explained. He said that they were pretty drunk a couple of weeks back, and she blurted out how she helped an ex destroy a marriage that stuck with him. And after asking non-stop and pushing her, she finally came clean to him. It was then that he pushed her to own up to her mistakes if she wanted peace in her life. Apparently, after she helped Michael, he started becoming cold and distant with her, and eventually broke it off 6 months later. At that point, she felt terrible, but was too scared to come clean and spent a lot of time in therapy trying to work through her issues. After everything was laid out on the table, my lawyer stepped in and said, "Let's take a 20-minute break and meet back again." Amanda and Mark stepped out and our lawyer discussed that. If I wanted, I could go after her and my brother for defamation. The evidence available was more than enough for me to do what I wanted. I was feeling a lot of rage, but I decided I didn't want this to spoil the wedding, and whatever I wanted to do would have to wait until after everything was done. I told Amanda that I would be in contact with her, but for now, I didn't want her telling anyone else. I didn't want any drama from my ex-family to impact my wedding. After that meeting, Kim hugged me and said that she felt right in trusting her instincts, and now felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. I shared her sentiment. We had a small wedding with both David and Derek being the best men and a 3-week-long honeymoon covering Europe. It was an amazing time for both of us. Thankfully, I was able to work through what I had heard, and Derek suggested that I should put this at the back of my mind. It didn't spoil the honeymoon too much, though. The nightmares were coming in more frequently than before. During that time, and Kim was always there to support me. I also had a discussion with my therapist who told me that I would need to confront my ex-family sooner or later, if not for anything else, then for closure. After thinking a lot about all that had happened, I decided to reach out to Amanda in July and told her what she needed to do. I told her that I would be taking legal action based on her statement, but if she wanted to avoid being financially ruined, she needed to follow my instructions. She needed to talk to Emily alone and explain to her everything she had told us back in the lawyer's office. She was crying while listening to me and told me that Mark had left her. I told her that I wished I could feel sorry for her, but I didn't, and then stated that karma hits everyone hard. VJ had hit her, and now it was coming for my brother. A couple of days later, I received a text. It was from Emily. Despite being blocked, I had been sending her birthday wishes and wishes on both our daughters' birthdays, as well as holiday greetings over text. This was the first message I had received in 8 years. She basically asked if we could talk. I didn't want to be alone when having this conversation, so I told her I would call her in a few hours. I reached home and was with Kim when the call took place. I could immediately hear Emily sobbing uncontrollably for a while before she told me how sorry she was and how terrible she was feeling. Somehow I was able to maintain my composure all this time. I told her that it hurt terribly, knowing that she thought so little of me, that she so easily fell into Michael's trap. I asked her about my girls. She said they were doing well, and then asked when she had met Amanda. She said she met her 2 days ago. It took a lot of time to process how wrong she was and how quickly she moved away from me. She immediately brought it to the attention of my ex-parents, and they were just as stunned. They all wanted to contact me, but she said she wanted to connect first and apologize. I told her that what she had done was beyond hurtful. I asked what had happened to the golden child. She stated that he had been kicked out of the house. I chuckled a bit. She told me she had married Michael a year after the divorce was finalized, as he was the one who supported her through this, and suddenly it all made sense. It looked like he had never gotten over her. She told me that she had a daughter with him too. After the discussions, I basically told her what was going to happen and detailed what I wanted. I wanted her to reach out to all my former extended family so that they were aware of what a piece of work he was. Secondly, I was only looking to co-parent my 2 girls, and that I told her that I do not have any intention to reconcile with her beyond what it takes to maintain a relationship with my daughters. Thirdly, I will text her the date and time when I want to meet my ex-parents, and I want to meet them in person. After that, I just hugged Kim knowing she was pregnant, and her mood would have been all over the place. I kept my emotions in check, but I guess she was crying for both of us, and we fell asleep on the bed. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was shut off, and when I put it on charge, I noticed the barrage of messages that were coming through. I had over 150 missed calls and hundreds of messages. I was also added to the family group message where every single one of them was apologizing. Over the next few days, I started getting messages from some of my friends who were apologizing for what had happened and how they jumped the gun on everything. The only reply I gave was to the family group, stating that since I was disowned almost 10 years ago, I was an outsider in this group and wished to remain so. Whether I forgive them or not will happen on my terms and my timeline, not theirs. I further told them not to add me back and left the group. Some of the family members tried to call me out by messaging me that they were disappointed in my reaction. I shut them down, saying they were not in a position to judge me after being so quick to assume what I did, and to not contact me again unless I contacted them first. A couple of weeks later, I called up Emily and told her I wanted her to bring my girls over the weekend so I could meet them properly. Kim, being as adamant and feisty as she is, said she wanted to meet her stepdaughters as well. We argued a lot, but it was mostly me telling her that since she was pregnant, she needed to take care of herself. But the determination in her was pretty strong. So I gave in. We met at a public park. Emily looked a bit disheveled, but made an effort to look as good as possible for this meeting. There I saw Olivia and Chloe for the first time in 8 years. They had grown so much. The only memories I had of them were on my phone, as I was pretty much blocked from all social media and everywhere else. Emily came crying, trying to hug me, and I put both my hands up front to decline. I then introduced her to Kim as my wife, and she broke down a sobbing mess in the park. Kim came forward to comfort her, and we sat down in a place close by. I grabbed both my girls and cried. My girls were never told about me until recently, and they were pretty conflicted as they only knew Michael as their father. But seeing me suddenly brought out some emotions. There was a lot of crying and talking. By the evening, we exchanged what had happened in our lives. She told me that she got married to Michael a year after the divorce was finalized, and he took care of her for the first few years. After that, things settled down. He still couldn't grow his landscaping business to a point where it was profitable, and then the pandemic basically forced him to shut the shop. His parents were now dipping into their savings in an attempt to make ends meet, and he never bothered to start something again, despite his parents telling him to. She said she's filing for divorce from Michael and can't stand the sight of him. I told her she's free to do what she wants, and it has nothing to do with me. I told her some details moving forward. Essentially, I wanted Olivia and Chloe to attend family therapy sessions with me going forward so we can heal. They've been robbed of their real father, and it was time to make it right. I want to be a part of their lives. I also wanted them to be with me and Kim over the weekends, but I told her that would have to wait as we had a child of our own coming, and I wanted to put my full energy into that for now. Lastly, she said that my parents wanted to reach out to me. I corrected her and said they were anything but my parents. I still had the letter of disappointment they sent along with the divorce papers, and I had nothing to do with them, but both Emily and Kim stated that it would help me get closure from them, so I agreed. I told her that I would tell her when and where I wanted to meet them. I booked her a hotel and told her that I wanted her to be in the city for the night, and I wanted some more time with my girls. With tomorrow being Sunday, we spent that Sunday together as well. But this time, I took them to the sights around the city, and we really enjoyed the time we had before leaving. Both of them gave me a warm hug, and I told them I would see them next week. I told Emily that she didn't need to drive the girls for the family therapy sessions, and that I would come over to them. I got a good recommendation from my therapist for that city, and we had a good first introductory session. The therapist spelled it out that sooner or later they would need to know what my ex-brother did, and I told her they would in due time. She suggested I write it out here and get a few outside perspectives on my situation as well. I can honestly say if it wasn't for Derek pushing me, I might not have made it to the point I have, which is what brings me to opening this forum to you. What should I do from here? I plan to confront my ex-parents sooner or later, and despite calling them my ex-parents, I still have emotions and feelings for them. I'm not sure if that makes sense. How do I deal with Michael? I don't think I ever want to see his face again. But do I go after him and ruin him with a defamation suit, knowing full well that he has a daughter with my ex and anything I do to him might impact her? If you have any questions, I will try to answer those.